Before discussing how an inverse function works, let's first discuss how a function works. Now, a function works by taking an input into it, processing it, and sending out the output. And the inverse function works through the reverse of this process. So the inverse function takes our output from our function, sends it into the inverse function, and gives us back out our original input. Now, to find our inverse function, you take your original function and you switch your x and y variables, and then solve for y again. So let's take, for example, that y equals x plus 2. So to find the inverse of this, we just switch our x and y's, and that gives us x equals y plus 2, and now we just solve for y by subtracting 2 from both sides. So that gives us that y equals x minus 2. So this is our inverse function. Now, if you remember, if we take the output of our original function and plug it in for the input of our inverse function, we'll get the original input. So we'll go ahead and take our original equation, and we'll make a t-chart for that. And go ahead and plug in the values for x of 0, 1, and 2, and see what our outputs are. So we plug in 0 in for x. 0 plus 2 is 2. And then we'll go ahead and plug in the 1 in for x. 1 plus 2 is 3. And then we'll go ahead and plug the 2 in for x. And 2 plus 2 is 4. So we made our original function's t-chart. And we'll go now make one for the inverse function. Now we'll use the output, the y values, and plug that in for our inputs, or our x. So we'll take the 2 and plug it in for the x. So 2 minus 2 is 0. And then we'll take the 3, plug that in for x. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then we'll take the 4 and plug that in. So 4 minus 2 is just 2. So we can see here that both the t-charts, the inputs of the inverse function are the same as the output of our original function, and the output of our inverse function is the same as the input for our original function. Another important aspect of the inverse function is that if you take the inverse function and plug it into the original equation, you always get x. So if we go ahead and take our x minus 2 equation and plug it in for x in our original equation, we have x minus 2 plus 2. The minus 2 and plus 2 just cancel each other out, leaving us with just x.